Hello wrestling fans, this is Tom Colohue back on YouTube once again, trying to give you a few updates with a particular one I'm going to be focusing on today, and that is how WWE are handling the information that's coming out about the coronavirus. How this is affecting their planning, particularly as regards getting closer to WrestleMania with the information I've got there. There'll be a little bit extra later on with regards to a few big names, for example Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax, so stay tuned to catch that news as well, but I'm going to get straight into the information I have at the moment as regards a very quickly developing and changing situation, and that is the coronavirus. Now, I'm obviously very aware of the situation with the coronavirus. I've been getting as many updates as anyone else has. I'm sure some people are sick of hearing about it, but in reality this is quite a major situation unfolding. We have to be aware of these things, and they announced quite recently that Italy, the country, is just closed. Champions League football is majorly affected. Sports games are affected. We're seeing it in the US. Colleges are telling people not to come in. This is a big deal, and the WWE are not exempt from things like this happening. They need to be aware of what's going on. Now, as regards the wrestling world, they can probably take the hit more than anyone else economically. They have already started looking at contingency plannings in case they are forced to shut some shows. For example, WrestleMania really is right around the corner. There's a number of options being considered. First and foremost, the idea of empty arena shows, because it's very hard for anyone in the WWE, and I mean this top level to the bottom level. Everyone wants to put on a show. Everyone wants to entertain. And while they may be forced to put on a show with an empty arena where they've not got that crowd noise and everything going on there, shutting down WrestleMania is not something they can really countenance. Mostly it's because more than anything WrestleMania isn't really a show for wrestling fans. It's a commercial for non-wrestling fans to get them to become wrestling fans. So it still works on that level. It will affect the performers definitely if that is what they are forced to do, but it would be a very extreme situation to cause them to shut down WrestleMania entirely. It's worth pointing out the amount of staff involved in a show like WrestleMania, in a show like Raw, in a show like SmackDown. It's not just the wrestlers, it's all of the announcers, it's all of the stage crew, cameramen, people setting up the ring, producers backstage, the creative team. So many people are involved that it may simply be the case that they have to shut down operations entirely as well. They simply cannot conduct business. If that is the case, we then would not have a WrestleMania, but in that case, it is the best possible option. But much like a situation that happened in Saudi Arabia, and they just stopped mentioning Saudi Arabia, the WWE are waiting on instruction from their president and their government as to how they should conduct themselves economically and business-wise. President Trump seems bullish in his methods, shall we say? So, for the moment, any closures of sports games and colleges and that is led by the sports games and colleges, not by the government. So at the moment, WrestleMania is still very much a go. There is a concern that the XFL, which is only recently started and started to really take shape, is going to be immediately affected by having to shut the stadiums, shut the arenas, and essentially have no one involved in that capacity. This is something that could impact that company heavily from the off. It's not something they want to do, but in the regards of safety, it's something they may have to do, because when the sports games start to close, it's very difficult for any other sports franchises to keep those doors open. It is the WWE and Stephanie McMahon who quite recently said philanthropy is the new marketing. They have to have that element of altruism. That's why we're seeing things like Braun Strowman saying, "Wash these hands." In this case, these hands. There's also a concern as to the stock price of the WWE. This recently took a hit when two of the top boardroom executives were let go from the company, and it hasn't fully recovered yet, but that recovery was planned. Essentially, they are interviewing people. Once they had people in place, the concept seemed pretty clear that the stock price would immediately lift back up again. That doesn't seem to have been the case just yet, especially building into WrestleMania, where it would definitely have hit a peak. However, with everything happening now, there is an economic hit that should be coming to the WWE. It's not something they want, it's not something anyone can plan for, but the stock market in general is tanking at the moment. It's unavoidable, and it's just the cost of looking after people's health. There are some things more important than money. So quickly in summary, WWE are aware of the concerns that are going on with the coronavirus. They are taking the lead from the president and the government as to how they should react to it. However, they are determined to put on a show of some sort. The most likely contingency is an empty arena, but there are other contingencies that they are considering. Moving on to other things now. There was a report recently that Shayna Baszler had already soured Vince McMahon on her by producing a match that wasn't met by unanimous applause. To my knowledge, this is not the case. Vince McMahon is still very excited to see what Shayna Baszler can offer on the main roster, and I think Elimination Chamber probably proved that point. You actually see this quite a lot when someone first moves onto main roster, or should I say Raw and SmackDown. And it happened with Asuka. It happened as far back as Survivor Series 99 as an example, quite far back, where Kurt Angle was dropped in. Nobody was sure how the crowd would react. When the crowd started to boo, the message was clear: okay, Kurt, play up to the boos, you're a heel now. His initial few weeks and storylines could have worked out for either face or heel. They wanted to see how people would react to Baszler. The intention was clear that she was supposed to be a heel. That's the reaction she got. Vince McMahon very happy and very excited to see how that's going to build up towards WrestleMania. Becky Lynch produced a very good promo on Raw, and this storyline seems to be firing on all cylinders. Nia Jax spoke out on Twitter recently saying that if only she was a 4-horsewoman, she would definitely be involved in a lot more storylines. Paraphrasing, of course, by all means check out the tweet. Nia Jax, to my knowledge, is due back soon. You can see that she's promoting herself and promoting what she's doing at the moment. I don't think this is a shoot report, as it were. I think this might be a little bit of kayfabe to drive up interest in her eventual return. To my knowledge, she will be back fairly soon. There have been talks about storylines being planned for her, but at the moment, because of other storylines, it just isn't really feasible to have her involved. It would just be getting in the way of things. I did report in January that it was too soon for her return at the Royal Rumble. I personally expected her to be appearing in the Women's Battle Royal at WrestleMania. I still expect that. I think there's a high chance she's winning it as well. As a final note, when asked recently, Ricochet said that he very much would like to go back to NXT if the choice was open to him. That doesn't necessarily mean that he wants to drop Raw and SmackDown or is unhappy on the rosters. It just means that he really enjoyed his time in NXT. He is a name that was on the shortlist that I was aware of when it comes to the NXT shortlist I've reported over the last few months. Well, late last year I reported this one. He was one that was mentioned maybe later on in the time of that, after I'd already reported it. I got a few more names afterwards, but it's difficult for me to come out and say this person wants to go back to NXT because it paints them in a potentially bad light to the company, and I don't want to do that to people. There's no benefit to doing that. Ricochet is someone who could of course feasibly go back to NXT. His storylines on Raw seem to have wrapped up just in time for after WrestleMania, when we may be seeing a new shake-up, which could then see people moving back to NXT, away from NXT. It could be as simple as moving Ricochet to SmackDown, someone new, new ideas. He could work pretty much very well with Gulak, Ali, Daniel Bryan. There's a lot of people he could have great matches with and great storylines with. Hopefully that is the plan, because I do think he's done everything he can on Raw at the moment, and after some comprehensive losses, that suggests to me there may be a big change in his future. That's all the news I've got. News for myself: I've been editing a few interviews that I did recently. There were some from Blackpool, of course, which I was involved in interview and press junkets there, so I've had to edit them and cut them out of interviews that I did with my colleague Gary Cassidy, who is of course head interviewer over at SK for SK UK. So he has the meat of it, and I just peppered in what I could to support him. That's something I can add in. There is also an interview, or again a round table, with Cesaro, and an interview just with one other person with Nikki Cross and Cedric Alexander. I cut out my questions with Cesaro. I'll be uploading them soon, whereas I'll be uploading the whole thing, more than 20 minutes, from Nikki Cross and Cedric Alexander. They are from November. They're interviews I conducted. I'm very proud of them, and it's a bit of content. So I'll be recording quick intros to really introduce a video. You may see me wearing the same t-shirt quite a lot because they're only 1 or 2 minutes, so I'll probably batch through them. So early March, definitely most of them were recorded. But after that, you'll be seeing new interviews, different stuff, hopefully stuff you'll quite enjoy. I've been Tom Colohue, this has been Wrestling News, and thank you for coming.